All right, so most of you guys on the test who messed up on the section that has to do with solving the exponential and logarithmic equations. And I am going to walk you through how to do this problem. And it's important that you spend a lot of time and you practice this. I'm going to allow you to retake your test on those questions, and that will allow you to raise your grade up to a 70%. All right, so let's make sure we're all okay with these. You definitely need to go back and practice them because the questions on the test will be different, so you have to understand the concepts. So I'm going to work question 6 on the paper practice test that you should have printed out and worked before you came and took your test. The first one I'm going to do is A. It's e to the 4x equals 1000. Okay, there was a problem just like this on the test. And this problem was also on the paper practice test. So the first thing you need to do is you need to look and see that this is an exponential equation because the variable is in the exponent. And then the next thing you have to check and make sure is that the exponential part of the equation is isolated, which this one is. There's no number in front of it. All right, so from previous sections on the logarithmic properties, we know that the natural logarithm undoes the effects of an e to the x. So we hit both sides with ln. Notice how I am writing everything out step by step. All right, now ln and e undo each other and we'll be left with 4x. This is the inverse property of logarithms. Notice that I don't actually key in ln 1000 into my calculator because actually on the test it asked you to leave it in exact form. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to solve for x. This is in exact form, and now we are done. If the question on the test asked you to write it in 3 decimal places after you found it in exact form, you would key that into your calculator. So let's say that we do actually want an answer to 3 decimal places. Okay, so we key in ln of 1000 divided by 4, and I get x is roughly 1.72694. So if we were to round it to 3 decimal places, that would be 1.727. Okay, so that's question 6A. Now we'll do question 6B on the practice test. Okay, so this again is an exponential equation because of the 5 to the 2x. Unfortunately, we can't hit it with the logarithm yet because there's 10 of them and we need to just isolate that term. So we're just going to divide both sides by 10. Okay, so now we have a problem like problem A, but in this case the base is 5. So what kills an exponential function 5 to the 2x is a log base 5 logarithm. So we simply take log base 5 on both sides. Log base 5, 5 to the 2x, these undo each other, and I'm left with 2x equals log base 5 to the 300. And then divide by 2. Now, if you're asked to leave this in exact form, this is the exact answer, hence the equals. If we want to compute it to say 3 decimal places, then we have to use the log base 5 button, which there isn't one, but you have a log base button on your calculator. So if you go to catalog and go down to log base, then you will be able to do this, and you will get 1.77198, which if we round it to 2 decimal places would be 1.772. Okay, so All exponential equations work that way. All right, now let's do some logarithmic equations. So we're going to do 6c on the practice test that you've already worked out before you came and took the test, because otherwise you would have found this test very difficult. Okay, so we want to isolate, just like we did, just like we did in the previous problems, we want to isolate the logarithm and get the logarithm on its own. And right now it's got this 2 with it, and it's being added to it, so I'm going to subtract 2 on both sides. And that's going to give me log 4x equals 3. All right, now the base of this logarithm, when we write log, that's really shorthand for log base 10. So we're going to use an inverse property of logarithms, the other one. So when we have a logarithmic equation, we're going to use the exponential inverse, right? So we put a 10 down here and a 10 down here. And we know that 10 log 10 undoes each other and gives us 4x equals 10 cubed, which is 10 times 10 times 10, which is 10,000. And then we'll divide both sides by 4, which is 2,500. Okay. Good. See how easy that is? They're not difficult, but again, it requires practice. So if the first time you've seen this problem is when you're taking the test, then it's going to be difficult to do. So let's make sure that you go back, and you can always go back to your the previous sections in the homework that cover these and do a couple of practice problems without actually changing your grade. So if you just click on the problem and it just says practice, you can do that. All right, so now we're going to do the last problem on here. So the last problem on this particular part is 6D. And it's log base 3x plus log base 318 equals 1. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we can't actually, the easiest way to solve this is to use the properties of logarithms. So we know from previous sections of working on homework that we can take two logarithms that are being added together and combine them as one. And this is called the product property. So we've taken those two logarithms and we've combined them as one. Now, as you all know, you're allowed a 3x5 note card. So if I were you, I would write down the steps required to solve these problems when you go in. Because again, once you understand the concept of it, it's actually fairly straightforward. All right, now this is a base 3 logarithm. So I'm going to use the inverse properties of logarithms. And now the 3 log 3 undoes each other. I get 18x equals 3. So that means that 18, and then I'm going to divide by 18. So I get x equals 1/6. Okay. So that takes care of the solving the equations. On that page, so many of you missed these problems. And the problems on the test were just like these 4 problems that I've done. So it's really important that you work your printed practice test until you understand the concepts of how to do everything. The questions on the test come directly from that printed practice test and the online review. So if you are familiar with those and understand all of those, you're going to do great on every test. And if you're not, you won't. So if you've got any questions, you're more than welcome to come to my office hours, but hopefully working those out so you can actually see the process helps you. And notice that I've written down step by step by step. If you don't show your work, I can't give you credit. So make sure and show your work. It does state that on the test, so also make sure before you take the test that you read the instructions. Okay, now we're going to go on to the next video. Is going to go talk about how to actually solve the actual word problems.